If you've listened to this podcast for more than 5 minutes, you already know my nervous system lives on the edge. That's why I love RYZE. Between being a mom, a teacher, and a full time researcher of all things sinister and spooky, I need energy that doesn't come with anxiety. My therapist says I have plenty of that already, which is why I love to start my day with RYZE. RYZE is a mushroom coffee blend that gives me focus without the jitters, and it actually helps me quiet my ADHD brain. It lifts my brain fog and somehow even made my gut health way better. We love a multitasking beverage. I usually drink it in the morning before I sit down to research or record, and it helps me stay clear headed instead of wired. I like to add a little cacao powder, a sprinkle of cinnamon, and of course, my favorite creamer. Then suddenly, it's a delightful little cup of emotional stability. RYZE isn't just coffee, it's gut health and nutrition that your body actually craves. With lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, shiitake, and turkey tail, you'll be saying, "Holy shiitake, I can actually focus," because these mushrooms help maintain focus throughout the day. They help maintain your stress levels, and they even boost immunity while clearing up that pesky brain fog. So if you're trying to kick your caffeine habit or you just want something that's genuinely better for your nervous system, head to the link in the show notes and use my code SuspectsandSpiritspodcast15 to get 15% off your first purchase. What have you got to lose? Again, that's Suspects and Spirits Podcast 15 to get 15% off your first purchase. Your lizard brain will thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Suspects and Spirits, and I'm your host, Taylor Seraphin. And I would like to formally announce that I'm currently in a committed relationship with Thin Mint cookies. No joke. You think I'm joking. I ordered like $50 worth of Girl Scout cookies, and let me tell you, it is hands down the best $50 I have ever spent. Whoever said money can't buy happiness has clearly never emotionally bonded with an entire box of Thin Mints. They should really come with a warning label because I will sit there and eat the entire box in one sitting. But I mean, hey, no shame in my game. When I tell you guys I love food, I don't think you understand. My husband and I will be like, "Hey, let's go on a date night. Let's try a new restaurant." And immediately when we decide on some place, I am pulling up a menu like it's a research project, and for days, I just casually scroll and obsess over what I will be eating. We went downtown in Tucson a few months ago to a place called JoJo's before we went to see Tom Segura, and I still dream about the Brussels sprouts there. They imprinted on me like Jacob Black, I swear. Like it did something to my soul. When we book vacations, the first thing I look up isn't like excursions or hotel amenities. I look those up too. But first, I look up menus and places nearby to eat. We went to Mexico a couple summers ago in Playa del Carmen. We stayed in this beautiful all-inclusive resort. We swam with cute animals. We had amazing views. But the entire time there, I was like, "So where are we going to eat? Well, it's for dinner. Where are we going?" Went to California with my sister-in-law in October, and the entire time it was, "Where are we eating?" And she's just as obsessed with food as I am. So we would look at each other and be like, "Are you hungry? Let's go eat." And then we'd search places. We ate at a really yummy place called, what was it called? Like Salty Dog or something, Lazy Dog, some shit like that. But they had really good food. And they had, you guys, they had deep fried deviled eggs, which shouldn't work, but they did. They did. And I still think about them to this day. Food just makes me happy deeply on a spiritual level. And right now, with all the fuck shit in the world, we need to find things that make us happy. So if it's a whole box of Thin Mints, you sit down and you enjoy those Thin Mints. Okay? Speaking of things that make me happy, it's February, which means spring training for the Diamondbacks is coming up. Very excited about that. Those tickets are a bit cheaper. I really want to go to some games. And also, there's this like tiny little event happening this weekend when this comes out. You may have heard of it. Are you guys excited? You excited for the protest? I mean, the Super Bowl? Green Day performing is honestly one of the biggest kiss my ass moments in Super Bowl history, and it makes my heart so happy. All that's missing, in my opinion, are the chicks coming out with Not Ready to Make Nice. Maybe then throw in some, Rage Against the Machine and then Bad Bunny, and we've officially got ourselves a revolution. Legit, though, whoever booked this lineup heard that racist rhetoric of that stupid all American halftime show. We want Americans, which Bad Bunny is. They heard that and they were like, oh, you want a white performance? Hold my cerveza. Legend. Legendary. Whoever did it, give them a raise. I love them. They have my full support. This will be the funniest NFL moment of all time. And then, of course, there was Kendrick's message last year, which just chef's kiss. Chef's kiss directly to the camera. Love that man. I cannot wait for Sunday. Also, my little one starts volleyball on Sunday, and I'm excited to watch her because kids sports, like, first of all, she's excited, but kids sports are truly the best. From that feral chicken phase of Pee Wee soccer where they just run around all crazy to actually learning coordination and teamwork, it is both wild and also so wonderful to watch them. They grow and they learn, and it's so cute. Um, what is not wonderful, but is definitely wild, is today's story. And this story, it's an old-timey one. We're talking like 1800s, and it has everything. Well, except for women's rights. Um, Also, I'm very sorry about my voice. I think I might be getting the plague. So just pretend it's nicer. There's nothing I can do about it. Pretend it sounds better than it does. Okay. Now let's dive in. Today, we are going to be talking about Cordelia Botkin. What a name. Cordelia Botkin was born Cordelia Brown in 1854 in Kansas City, Missouri. Very little is known about her early life, including the actual day of her birth. I couldn't figure out what her sun sign was, but we do know that in 1872, at just 18 years old, she married a wealthy grain broker, and his name was Welcome. Welcome Botkin, who was 15 years her senior. And yes, his name was actually Welcome, which I don't know why I'm saying it like that. I think it's because of that scene in She's the Man. Every time I hear Welcome, I think of that scene when the principal is welcoming Sebastian to the school. And he's like, I just want to say welcome. Welcome to Illyria. Welcome, 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 welcome. I can't do anything without quoting a movie. You guys should know this by now. Anyways, her husband's name was Welcome. Imagine how confusing that would be if you have guests over and you're opening the door and you're like, oh, welcome. And he's like, what? What do you need? And she's like, no, I meant the guests. I'm welcoming them. And he's like, oh, okay. Pretty confusing. It's like naming a dog Stay. I don't know, but that was his name. About 2 years later, the couple welcomed a welcomed a son. The couple brought a son into the world. Okay, they had a baby. They named him Beverly. They lived a fairly conventional life until the late 1880s. And this was when Welcome accepted a new job with the Armoire Packing Company, and the family relocated to Stockton, California, kind of chasing that opportunity. Cordelia, however, being the woman she wasn't exactly built for a quiet domestic life. She was often described as short and stout, their words, not mine, with what many at the time called a frumpy appearance. If anyone ever described me that way, you'd be on my shit list. What? That is so mean. Back in the day, they really did not care. They were like, yeah, she's a frumpy old hag. Like, what? Guys are rude. But Cordelia, thank goodness, she did not see herself that way, not even close. She believed that she was just irresistible. She bragged about being photographed in over like 100 poses, including some very scandalous, suggestive poses for the Victorian era. One of her favorite poses involved her placing her hands behind her head with her elbows out. Apparently, this position was meant to draw attention to her boobs and her face. So back then, this was practically rebellion. They were like, whoa, who is this baddie? What is she doing? And she said, draw me like one of your French girls, Jack. By the mid 1890s, though, Cordelia and Welcome's marriage had deteriorated quite a bit, unfortunately. Welcome was more conservative and very reserved, and Cordelia had more of a wild streak. She preferred gambling, drinking, and socializing. But because it was the 1800s and divorce wasn't like socially acceptable or easily attainable. Instead, they separated while remaining legally married, which was, I guess, common back then for couples that didn't really work out. Cordelia took their son Beverly and moved to San Francisco, where the nightlife suited her much better because we know San Francisco is just a fun time. Now, Welcome, he decided to stay in Stockton, but he continued sending alimony to Cordelia. And during these visits, he began having an affair with Cordelia's landlady, Clara. Meanwhile, Miss Cordelia embraced the single life as well. In 1895, while sitting in a park near the future Golden Gate Bridge, she caught the attention of a 32-year-old associate press reporter named John Dunning. His bicycle had broken down nearby, and after fixing it, he noticed Cordelia on a bench. And despite the social rules of the time, which very, very much discouraged like casual interactions between unmarried men and women, John decided to approach her anyway. And of course, the attraction was mutual and also immediate. John had recently returned from reporting overseas on tensions between the US, Great Britain, and the Imperial Germany in Samoa. This was coverage that had earned him a promotion to superintendent of the Associated Press's Western Division. So he was very successful, very respected, and also very married. His wife, Mary Elizabeth, had actually moved with him to San Francisco years earlier. They had a daughter also named Mary, but Mary Elizabeth, his wife, struggled a lot in California. She really missed where they came from, which was Delaware, and she leaned heavily on her faith and felt increasingly disconnected from John, who she said worked constantly and did not share her religious devotion. So clearly, a match made in heaven. Their marriage was already very, very fragile when Cordelia entered the picture. So John and Cordelia began bonding over mutual dissatisfaction with their partners. They were like, hey, does your partner suck? So does mine. Let's cheat on them. I'll never get it. And while doing that, Cordelia introduced John to gambling halls, brothels, and bars that he'd never experienced before. He was like, holy shit, this is a whole different life. Cordelia drank like one of the guys, and she talked openly about sex and quickly became his escape from responsibility. And of course, there's nothing wrong with a woman being a little more progressive at the time. But not great that she was having an affair with a married man while also still technically married herself. So this affair began, and in the neighborhood, Cordelia started to develop a reputation, especially among other women. Basically, other women would roll their eyes when they saw her coming. No one really liked her, and her behavior clashed quite hard with the Victorian expectations of the time. And she was widely viewed as immoral. John didn't really bother hiding their relationship. He was pretty sloppy about it, and rumors spread very, very quickly. And of course, eventually, Mary Elizabeth, his wife, learned about the affair. So she was humiliated. She was embarrassed and heartbroken, and she stayed for about a year trying to make things work before finally saying, I'm done. This is stupid. You're stupid. And I'm returning to Dover, Delaware with our daughter to live with my parents, which, like, good for her, you know? Her father was actually a sitting congressman, and his name was John B. Pennington. So he was a pretty powerful guy. Mary Elizabeth was now gone, so John and Cordelia plunged fully into their chaotic lifestyle. They were drinking, they were gambling, it all intensified and escalated very, very quickly. And John, who was very inexperienced with all of this, he began just being like that girl you bring to a party who's never partied before, you know, and she's flirting with everybody and she's falling over drunk and she's throwing up in someone's purse and just all of that. He was a mess. He is a real mess. And he racked up massive debts and made a very disastrous decision. He decided that he was going to steal roughly $4,000 from the Associated Press. Guys, this is in the 1800s. So that means that $4,000 he stole, that's equal to about $126,000 today. He just stole it. He was like, this is mine now. And he was hoping to gamble it back. Um, Clearly, he doesn't know how gambling works. So he lost and he was fired, but never prosecuted. I guess they just kind of gave him a slap on the wrist, fired him, and that was that. Now, John and Cordelia's relationship lasted for about 3 years until 1898. And that is actually when his job reached back out to him and offered him a major assignment. So the Associated Press were like, hey, you stole money, but whatever. So they, they offered him an assignment covering the looming Spanish American War. And this opportunity triggered a moment of clarity for him. He was like, I got to stop doing this shit. I can't be running around being drunk and gambling my life away. So he told Cordelia that he was going to leave for Cuba and that when he finished his assignment, he actually planned to return to Delaware and try to reconcile with his wife. And this news did not go over well with Cordelia. She was devastated. She begged him not to go. She was like, please stay. We're having so much fun. And John was like, no, it's time for me to be an adult. And he left anyway. But what once felt like despair to Cordelia quickly turned into a fiery hot rage. So, back in Delaware, Mary Elizabeth began receiving anonymous handwritten letters describing John's affair and warning her not to take him back. Which, gee, I wonder who was writing those. That's so crazy. So she kept receiving these letters and she didn't really know what to do with them or how to approach the situation. So she just kind of tucked them away for later on. But then on August 9th, 1898, a package arrived at her parents' home where she was, and it was a box of chocolates, chocolate bonbons, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a pink satin ribbon, which sounds really nice. But this is a true crime podcast, so it's not. Inside was a lace handkerchief, whatever. You guys all say it differently. So inside was that, and there was also a price tag still attached to it. And then there was a note that was signed, and it said, quote, with love to yourself and baby, Mrs. C, end quote. So Mary Elizabeth assumed that this came from a friend of theirs in San Francisco, and she saved the chocolates for after dinner. That evening, after eating trout and corn fritters, because it's the 1800s, the family gathered on the porch to cool off because back then, people would be cooking in the kitchen. There was no AC or anything. It would get really hot, so they'd go outside to cool down. While outside on the porch, they're talking, they're hanging out, and Mary Elizabeth was like, oh, dang, you guys, I forgot I have these chocolates. Let's have some dessert. So she offered the box of chocolates to everybody. She ate 3 of them. Her sister took several. And then there were also visiting relatives and neighborhood children over for dinner that night, and they sampled one each. But Mary Elizabeth's parents, they were like, no, we're good. We don't want any chocolate. So they declined. And within hours, every single person who had eaten the chocolates became violently ill. They had severe stomach pain. They were vomiting everywhere. They had bloody diarrhea. They had hallucinations. It was awful, awful. So Mary Elizabeth's dad was very, very concerned, and he called a doctor over to their house. And this first doctor initially blamed food poisoning. He was like, it was probably whatever you guys ate this evening. But Mary Elizabeth's dad was like, no, her mother and I ate the same thing that they ate, and we feel perfectly fine. So he didn't like what that first doctor had to say, and he brought in a second opinion. And this physician did suspect poisoning, but not the food kind. He said this was deliberate poisoning, and unfortunately, there was nothing that they could do. He was like, yeah, they've been poisoned. Not a lot I can do. Have a good night. So this dad is very frustrated. He's trying to help, but his daughters are extremely sick, and their symptoms worsened over several very, very agonizing days. And eventually, they died from the poisoning. So Mary Elizabeth's father, he calls John Dunning, her estranged husband, and he tells him what has happened. And John immediately rushes home from Cuba. And meanwhile, Mary Elizabeth's father immediately suspects the chocolate. He's not a dumb guy. He's like, it had to be the chocolates because that is the only thing my wife and I didn't eat, and everyone else got sick. So the remaining candies that were in the box, he sent out to a chemist who actually confirmed that they contained arsenic. Now, arsenic is a naturally occurring, highly toxic element found through the Earth's crust in the soil, water, and rock. It appears as a silver gray. It's very brittle and solid in its purest form, and it combines with other elements to form inorganic compounds, which are more toxic. It's a very well known poison and a potent carcinogen. It's also used in industrial applications such as treated wood, pesticides, and electronics. So people do use it for things. And historically, it was used as a pesticide and an herbicide. But today, it's used in, like wood preservatives and also glass manufacturing. It's odorless and it's tasteless, so it's impossible to detect without laboratory testing. So now, Mary Elizabeth's father is left just completely grief stricken. He is so beside himself. He's waiting for John to come home, and he begins to start going through Mary Elizabeth's belongings. And when he did, he actually discovered those anonymous letters that Mary Elizabeth had been receiving about that affair that John Dunning was having. And he became very upset. He was like, "What the fuck is this? You were running around on my daughter, and that's why she came home? She didn't tell me that part." So John explained everything, and he also explained that he was trying to reconcile and that he had planned to come home to Delaware after his assignment. And when her father showed John the letters, he immediately recognized the handwriting. He said that it belonged to Cordelia and that the note with the chocolates matched that handwriting. So immediately upon learning this, San Francisco police were contacted and investigators were able to trace the chocolates back to their origin. It was a place called the George Hawes Confectionery, where a clerk remembered selling half of a box to a short, stout woman who planned to add homemade candies, which is weird. Why would you go buy candies if you're going to fill the other half with your own homemade candies? It's just, I don't know, bizarre situation all around. So this guy, George, he was like, "Yes, I remember selling them to this woman, and it matched Cordelia's description to a T." And then that handkerchief that was in there also was a piece of evidence that led detectives to the City of Paris department store. And that is where a saleswoman vividly recalled Cordelia. She said that she remembered Cordelia because she so closely resembled her deceased mother. And then a postal clerk remembered mailing a similarly wrapped package addressed to a Mrs. John Dunning, aka Mary Elizabeth. And finally, an Owl drugstore employee recalled selling arsenic to a woman matching Cordelia's description. Crazy how they could just be like, "Hey, could I have a bottle of arsenic?" "Sure, how much would you like?" It's so bizarre. So they did a search of Cordelia's hotel room where she had been staying, and it revealed leftover wrapping paper and string from the chocolate box. They also brought in handwriting experts who confirmed that the letters, the note, and Cordelia's love letters to John were all written by the same person. Now, we know handwriting analysis isn't it's not an exact science. It can be a little murky here and there. We've talked about that. But this situation's a little different, right? It's a little different. Now, despite the fact that no autopsies had been performed, Cordelia was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder. They said, "That's enough for us. This is perfect evidence. You're going to jail." So she was arrested at her sister's home and she was put on trial in San Francisco. This was a huge deal because it was the first American murder by mail case and the first prosecution spanning 2 states. Because remember, she lived in California and Mary Elizabeth was in Delaware. Now, this whole situation, the courtroom, everything, it became a spectacle. Newspapers obsessed over Cordelia's sexuality and her appearance. And what made it even more of a sensation was how Cordelia behaved during the trial. She came to court dressed in all black, clutching a lace handkerchief like she was attending her own funeral. Quite dramatic. Now, during all the testimonies, John did testify, and the defense attempted to portray him as very promiscuous, suggesting that other women could have committed the crime because, he cheated on his wife. But John, he refused to name anyone, even after being jailed overnight twice. They were like, okay, lock him up. If he's not going to talk, go put him in jail because apparently they think that'll make people talk. I don't know. But he really didn't want to mention any other names because he didn't want anyone being implicated when he was pretty sure that it was just Cordelia. So even if he had other affairs with other women, he didn't think that any of them had anything to do with this and that they should be left out of the press. He was pretty certain that this was Cordelia based on all the evidence and the way she reacted and just, her basically. So then it was time for Cordelia to take the stand, and she presented herself as a very pleasant and composed lady. She admitted to purchasing the arsenic, but she claimed that it was for cleaning a straw hat, which back then would make sense. But she also claimed to have an alibi that no one could ever corroborate. Like, babe, if you're going to have an alibi, you've got to have someone to corroborate your story. You can't just say you were at the general store and then no one saw you there. Or you can't say you were with a friend if you don't tell that friend the plan. So thankfully, she didn't do that. And after about 3 weeks of deliberation, the jury did decide to convict her. They said that she was guilty and she was sentenced to life in prison, which for the families, that was great. That was great news. They were finally getting justice. But because Cordelia was Cordelia, her story did not end there. Later on, it was discovered that she had actually been bribing guards with sexual favors for privileges, including leaving jail to go shopping. Yes, you heard that correctly. She was sleeping with the guards so that she could just go about her day-to-day life and go shopping because why not? Now, the reason people found out about her little outings was because one day when she was out shopping, a judge saw her, a local judge, and he was like, Miss Cordelia, bitch, aren't you supposed to be in jail? Like, you killed somebody. What are you doing out here? And once she was exposed, she tried so hard to claim a mistaken identity. She was like, that wasn't me. I've been in jail this whole time. I don't know what you guys are talking about. But no one ever believed her. They were like, okay, Cordelia. Okay. Now, this obviously had to stop, but nobody was talking about what was going on with the guards. It's like everybody kept it kind of hush hush, and they just tried to keep her in jail as much as possible, which actually ended up being pretty easy when in 1906 there was a massive earthquake that hit the prison and it completely destroyed it. So after that, Cordelia was then transferred to San Quentin. Not exactly a place where she could go on outings. That's a pretty rough place. And while in San Quentin, it is said that her health deteriorated quite a bit. And she did apply for parole, but she was denied over and over again. She ended up dying in 1910 at age 56. And the official cause was listed as softening of the brain due to melancholy. So she literally died of depression, which is sad. But also, I mean, she killed somebody. So not exactly a boo-hoo moment for John Dunning and Mary Elizabeth's father and mother and everyone else who was affected because Cordelia didn't just kill Mary Elizabeth. Mary Elizabeth shared those chocolates. So Cordelia killed more than one person and made more than one person violently ill. She affected children. She affected family members. It was terrible. You can't poison people. Now, what was really interesting in this story is that Cordelia, she was technically still married to Welcome Botkin because divorce wasn't allowed back then. But because she ended up killing somebody and she was a felon, Welcome Botkin actually was able to divorce her, and that was before she passed away. He also later died of heart failure, and their son Beverly also died very young. So, really, just a tragic situation all around for them as well. Because Cordelia, girl, you didn't just affect their life, you affected yours too. Like, your poor son had to live with the fact that his mom was a killer. And then Welcome was tied to you because of your marriage. Like, you're ruining so many lives. So many lives. And that's just a really selfish way to live your life. So the story of Cordelia Botkin became a very cautionary tale of, a woman very ahead of her time in independence and sexuality. That was great. Be ahead of your time. But ultimately, all of that was undone by her obsession and her vengeance and her insecurity. She pioneered a new kind of crime, and that was murder by mail. Like I said, this was the first instance of it in American history. I mean, that we know of. And if there's one lesson here, any kind of takeaway, any like moral of the story, it is one we've talked about before. We talked about it in Donna Winger. We've talked about it many times. And that is that no one, no man, no woman is worth like killing for. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're competing over someone's affection, just make like Elsa, let it go. Let them go. That's some bullshit. Go let them figure out their life and you do you. Because the right person will come along and you'll be happy, I promise. But you won't be happy in jail. So don't do bad things. And with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to leave a little review if you enjoyed this episode, and be wary of chocolates that are left on your doorstep. Unless they come with a wilderness badge and a wagon of Thin Mints, just say no. Just say no. Hugs, not poison. I was going to say drugs, but that doesn't really apply there. Well, I guess poison can be drugs. Anyways, be good humans. And as always, remember to trust your lizard brain. Until next time, goodbye.